cannot believe that she said that to me. I can't believe she did that. I cannot believe he is so crazy that he thinks that way. Why would he do that to me? These are how we often experience the borderline behaviors. They can often be exceptionally cruel and hurtful and wounding, not only to themselves, but to us, those on the other side of this disorder. I thought that this 5-part series, this is part 3, breaking down the different areas of instability in terms of borderline and what it looks like in real life would be helpful, because many people, I really do believe, are walking around with parents and partners. This disorder is wildly misdiagnosed and underdiagnosed in both men and women. And though we do know that women are more diagnosed more often, we also believe that men are just as likely to have this disorder. It just can look a little different. In fact, if you want to check out borderline in men, here's a video I made. Now, let me just say that when you are on the receiving end of a borderline's behavior, it is wounding for them, but it is especially wounding for you if you are a child of a borderline parent. And we really are going to see this manifestation of the cognitive instability and the relational and the emotional and the sense of self really sort of all swirl together to create behaviors that are incredibly hurtful at the core. And they are hurtful for borderlines too. But this video is addressing what it feels like to be on the outside of that. So in case you have this disorder and or you are on the receiving end or have been, you understand what it feels like. And also I hope you feel validated for this part. So the core of this behavioral instability is really going to be about drama and chaos, and it's just always going to be something with BPD, right? And it's not necessarily always the borderline's fault, but as a result of the way they run their lives, the way they interpret things, the people they choose, and trying to heal their own wounds perhaps, and or just their own difficulty, the life is just sort of chaotic and dramatic, and it's just, there's always a relational issue or, something to do with an experience that happened. It's just always something. So keep that in mind. If you're trying to assess, does my parent have this or did they? Does my partner? You're going to see a lot of drama. So that crazy making at times is really the result of a borderline's difficulty with not being impulsive and acting out. They have a feeling, a thought, it's like a lightning strikes them and they have to strike back, I believe. And so this can often feel like an impulsive and acting out of nowhere. Like, why did you just say that to me? I don't know where that came from. But the borderline can be so triggered in that moment that it does feel like lightning is striking them and striking you. And so we often will see it manifest in physical, sexual, emotional, and verbal abuse by the borderline towards a child, towards a partner, and sadly also towards themselves in many cases. But in terms of sexual abuse, that's pretty clear. Borderlines, as a result of their own trauma and their own stories and genetics and all of that, can cluster together. If they've had their own sexual abuse, it could be more likely, depends on the situation, and or just because of their lack of boundaries and trying to quell that storm inside. And so sexual abuse in any form is not acceptable. The next one would be physical abuse. Now, a lot of borderline parents will punch, kick, slap, spank, grab, scratch, pinch in a loss of control. And they are so often, as we've talked about in other videos here, and I'll make a separate video on rage specifically, but because they can be so enraged and so triggered and angry, this is not going to stop them from losing control of their bodies towards a child or a partner, whether it's slapping the partner, slapping a child in rage. They can be very physically aggressive and abusive, and they often will dissociate and not remember all of it and not be even accountable to their behaviors. I never spanked you like that, or you were lucky you ever got spanked. And you're like, yeah, you beat the shit out of me in my childhood, So this is something that is very pervasive and can be. Now, obviously these things by themselves are not BPD, but as I'm saying, in the cluster of all the other criteria, this can be a component. Obviously, verbal and emotional abuse, I think these two hold hands and walk together with the borderline. They often are so emotionally wounded themselves that nothing will stop them from being manipulative or hurtful, and also deeply verbally abusive. That's why I said in this video that oftentimes they will call you names or accuse you of things and say really just devastatingly hurtful things about who you are. And in that moment, they often don't mean it. They'll tell you later, or you should just get over it. It can be just be no limits there in terms of what they can say or do to you. Now, because of that emotionally abusive and verbal abusive situation they can give to you, they are doing that, right? Because they feel at the core they're going to be left or abandoned. They're feeling less than, but they often create those abandonment wounds and that wanting to leave them later. And I believe that the verbal and emotional and physical and sexual abuse regarding whatever those are, the core of the abusive nature of a borderline, especially towards a child, is often why we see adult children which will say things like I said in this video about, I just wish she would die. I wish she would just get it over with, because it feels like there's no way out. There is a way out. And I'm not going to, promise you a rose garden here, but I will say that if a borderline is doing the work and in treatment and stays in treatment and is willing to do what it takes, we can begin to see a shift in healing. But there are a lot of wounds that have to be made and corrected and repaired, especially if, let's say, you were a parent with this disorder and over the years your loss of control and verbal and emotional abuse, consistently wounded and gave trauma potentially to your child. So that's important. I'm going to make a video next about BPD versus Cptsd, and I'd like to use the example of a borderline parent with a Cptsd child or adult child to give you how I'm going to compare and contrast. So I hope that will be helpful too. But the truth is, because of all of this engagement, there can be a lot of trauma, not only for the borderline who's enacting it and living it, but clearly and no doubt for the children in the home or the partner who is trying to understand why somebody who can be so wonderful and great at times can also be so, wounding and hurtful and out of control. Now, because of all of this chaos going inside, we often do see a high comorbidity with BPD and eating disorders, compulsive behaviors and disorders, substance abuse. There's just this swirling tornado going on inside at all times for the borderline, and they are desperately trying to get a hold of that. And so it increases their likelihood and risk that they might use other means or substances or strategies to try to navigate this tornado going on inside. And lastly, this tornado is pretty significant because for many people, in fact, borderline is one of the highest risks for suicide for many people, whether it's self-harm or suicidality, because they can get so caught up in those emotions that they can definitely, and their impulsivity act out on that. And I have to think that because women often attempt suicide, but men often complete suicide, I do believe there are many men who have been undiagnosed or improperly diagnosed with another disorder or something else, that their tendency to take, suicidal ideation and or risks, because they tend to also choose more aggressive and lethal means, puts them at risk too. So it really, to me, the core of this disorder, I really believe, and the research tends to show that it is much more pervasive than we really understand. And that means if you have the disorder, God knows you need help. But what it also means is that many, many, many millions of human beings walking around who were raised by parents like this, who don't necessarily fit any criteria and at times could be, like I say, in the light and be good. And it's so confusing. Or they've set it up to where you need them and you feel really close to them, and yet they can also hurt you so, so deeply. And we're often faced with the choice of to just completely abandon them, which is what they never wanted in the first place, or to abandon ourselves. And neither one is ideal, clearly. So I hope this video was helpful in sort of breaking down what borderline looks like and from a behavioral perspective. I hope you'll consider subscribing and clicking the bell, and that way you'll get notified when I post new videos. And I hope you guys will stay safe and well. And please don't forget to like this video if you like this video. And I sincerely, as always, appreciate your time and your thoughts, and just hope that this helps in some way. All right, guys, stay safe and well, and I'll see you next time. Bye.